Yeah, the call of wild's always bringing me home. Call of wild's always bringing me home. Call of wild's always bringing me home.
Well, hello, wild ones. Welcome to another episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I'm very excited to have a special guest here with me today, Monica, and she wrote the amazing books, the Trumpet, the Miracle Wolf Pup books, and that is associated with the Wolf Conservation Center in upstate New York. So, Monica, I'm very happy to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, I'm so excited. So, I guess a good place to start is, when did you start working with the Wolf Conservation Center?
So it was almost a decade ago, I think a little over 9 years. And, I just, I didn't even know they existed at the time. It was actually my sister-in-law who found the Wolf Conservation Center, wanted to visit. Unfortunately, at that time, everything was booked out. So she wasn't able to visit at that time. And I had wanted to come. I tried to arrange it with some friends of mine, and it kept on falling through. And then I noticed on their website that they had volunteer opportunities, and I'm a huge volunteer fan. So I was like, well, yeah, I'll just volunteer, and that way I'll be able to go there instead of just kind of like booking by myself. And I did, and I was just wowed. They had me at hello. So it was a great
Oh, that's
choice.
amazing. Wow. And you've been volunteering there ever since, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I started
Wow, that's
volunteering
amazing.
with the education team, and then I've since started volunteering with the animal care team, helping the curator just to, take care of all the wolves that are there.
It's amazing. And I've been lucky to be up there once. I think when we were chatting, I told you I mistakenly brought my son. I thought he was gonna enjoy it, but it was too much for him because he was like a little too young at the time. So I can't wait to go back at a time when I can like fully appreciate the whole place. But I think the Wolf Conservation Center is like a really special place too. I think especially for us people that like live in New York, I think there's not that many places that have like, where you can go see wolves.
Oh yeah.
And what makes it extra special, right, is like their breeding programs to help the critically endangered Mexican gray wolf and the red wolf.
hmm Yeah. There in the nation, there are, I think, over 50 facilities that do participate in that program. And in the tri-state area, there's at least one more place. That's Beardsley Zoo, but I don't know if they are. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is the one who decides which wolves get to breed and which wolves don't. So they make ultimately the decision based on the wolves, not necessarily the facility. That
Right.
obviously the facility has to participate in the breeding program, but they're the ones who decide which wolves, because genetically that's a challenging setup as far as making sure you know certain genes are not flooding the gene pool, and so they base it on those parameters.
Right. And that kind of leads me, we'll go into what caused you, what brought you to write the book, but a big portion of why Trumpet is such a miracle pup is because of this genetic diversity that is needed for these critically endangered wolves. So maybe if you want to explain a little bit on that as well.
Yeah, so it actually started with the Trumpet's father, Diego. He, at the time, was the number one most genetically distinct male Mexican gray wolf in the entire program. And so, obviously, they wanted him to have a lot of puppies so that that gene pool could spread and, have a bigger representation and help with the diversity that's needed. Fortunately, he had fertility issues, and lo and behold, there was one pup that that was descendant from his line, and that was Trumpet. And so she became kind of nicknamed the Miracle Wolf Pup or the Miracle Pup. And when I learned about that part of her story, I was like, that, I mean, kids love miracles. People in general love miracles, but I mean, especially
Yeah.
with kids, because it comes forth as a surprise, as a wonder. And so, so I said, you know, when I learned that part and the other part of how she got her name, I was like, this really should be a story told to all kids. And you know, the perfect format for that is a children's book format.
Yes. And first of all, I have it here. So Trumpet the Miracle Wolf. Oh, sorry if you hear my dog in the background. Um just just naming after Trumpet, but I have the book here, Trumpet the Miracle Wolf Pup, and my son loved it. The second he saw it, he was like gravitated towards it, and he made
I'm
me
so
read it twice. So
I love that.
yeah, definitely a good kids book.
Yeah. You know,
um
when I started reading these more to kids, because I don't have kids of my own, but when I started reading them to kids, you know, the best moment for me as reading it is when you get to the part of when they find her and just how the kids light up. I mean, they just, it's just such a wonderful moment to see that reaction.
Yeah, I love that. And then maybe for people that don't know Trumpet's story yet, maybe if you want to explain why her name is Trumpet, I think is very cute.
Yeah. So, the staff, they really weren't sure if there were puppies. You know, when they actually went up to the enclosure, they were kind of looking. This is actually on. They do have video of this. They have so much video at the Wolf Conservation Center, so it's kind of hard to find. But they do. I think it's named something like 8 Day Old Pup or something like that. But they do have video
Oh,
when they found her, and you can see their faces. They're like, yeah, yeah. But it actually was her making noise, her cooing, they call it, little kind of howl coo. And it was really loud. And so it was actually Babs. She looked into the box and said, there's a pup in here. And when they started talking about how loud she was, that's when, you know, someone mentioned like a trumpet, and lo and behold, that's how she got her nickname. So yeah, that's, you know, I just love like true stories like that when it's just blends together perfectly.
yeah, it's such a great story, right? Because it has like like you said, it kind of has the perfect blend of almost like underdog, or like you're really rooting for the parents and like the conservation center, and like there's so much weighing in on these two wolves coming together to create like a little family, and at least there was one, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's so special.
Yeah. And it, you know, that's part of it, you know, overcoming these challenges genetically. Also, sometimes, you know, unfortunately, you know, they are critically endangered. So the program is kind of like matchmaking, you know, or, you know, the Bachelor, you know, putting these two wolves together. And they don't always end up being a love match. Um, Rosa and Diego, Trumpet's parents, they were definitely a love match. And also Trumpet and Lighthawk. Lighthawk comes into the series in the third book. Trumpet finds love. They actually happen to be a love match as well. And so that's also nice because when you have those love matches, you do see a lot more the courting behavior, and obviously it's better for the wolves. So that was nice to highlight as well.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I feel like that's such a good point, that like there's so many things that are difficult about trying to help these wolves, right? Especially in this breeding program. That you made a good point, right? Like how some can be a love match, but some you introduce and maybe they just don't get along, even though that they would be perfect genetically. It doesn't always work like that, right?
Right. Yeah. So, and that's happened a couple times, including now with one of our red wolf pairs. If they were in
Mhm.
the wild and they met up, they wouldn't have chosen each other to, they likely would have just kind of moved on and, sought out another mate.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and what's special about the Wolf Conservation Center is like you have two different species of critically endangered animals, the red wolf and the Mexican gray wolf. So, do you know which species is like, doing, I guess, better, or like what is their like species status each, if you know?
Yeah, so I would say with the caveat, critically endangered is critically endangered. So even one doing better than the other, they're still both, at a
Yeah.
point where we really need to make sure that we're building that population up, um, especially in the wild. Um, and it was interesting when I first came on, the Red Wolf program was doing a lot. It was on the decline, but it was doing a lot better than it is now. It's declined since. They have less than 30 red wolves in the wild right now. And it was really just not supporting the wild program. The US Fish and Wildlife kind of just pulled back, I think, more on staffing, just all around letting, positions where someone I was either retiring, resigning, just kind of letting that position fall away. And the population, I think, when I started there, was if not close to 100, over 100 in the wild, and
Mhm.
then has declined in at its lowest point. I think it was like roughly around 10 or something like that in the wild, with only one breeding family. So it definitely has suffered. And then contrasting that with the Mexican gray wolf program, I don't remember exactly what the number was as far as how many Mexican gray wolves were in the program, in the wild at that time, but it has increased year after year. So, and that program, I think, is getting a little bit more support. One of the things that the conservation groups really want is they do want more breeding families to be released into the wild, um,
Right.
because they do have, I don't know if we want to mention this at this point, but they do have a cross fostering or fostering program where they will take the small puppies that were born in captivity. They will select some of them to be flown out into the wild and then fostered into a den where another wild mother has puppies around the same age. They do that before the puppy's 2 weeks old, before they open their eyes, before they can hear. Um, all of this featured
Right.
in book 2, which goes into pup development, because it is pretty rapid how quickly they develop. But yeah, they will fly them into the wild, and then wolves are one of the families that will gladly adopt a small puppy. So,
Wow.
yeah, and it's been a couple of cases where even though being a puppy is very challenging in the wild. It's, I think, about roughly 50% survival rate. They have actually found some of those cross-fostered puppies in the wild as either juveniles or adults. So,
Wow.
it's nice to see that at least that genetic line that they're trying to get out in there is being represented. However, that is also to say, just because that puppy survives to maturity does not mean that that puppy will choose as an adult to leave the family and start a family of their own. Some wolves will decide to
Mhm.
stay with their family, and therefore they will not have start breeding, with their family, the breeding pair, some will still call the alpha male and female. They are the pack leaders, and they are the ones that breed. So if that puppy were to stay, then that genetic material will not pass on because they will not be part of the breeding pair.
Right, right. And you kind of can't force that, right? Like that's
No,
completely
no,
up to
that's,
them. So,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So that's really incredible how and it just goes to show how I don't know, wolves are one of my favorite animals. It just goes to show how like beautiful they are, that like they're willing to, take in an adopted puppy. No problems, um
Yeah,
and
I
yeah.
love that too. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just so beautiful that they're so family oriented, and I feel like I'm constantly bringing up on this podcast how they get such a bad rap. I don't know why they're so loved and hated. I've brought up a couple of times that I kind of feel like because of wolves' closeness to us as like people, since the beginning of like, when we started like becoming humans and how we used to partner with them to hunt, that and we had similar hunting patterns, which was why we kind of teamed up, is that we're so similar that I think sometimes people maybe, project some of their negative emotions onto what wolves represent instead of just accepting them for, what they are. And there's just a lot more depth to them than, people try to put on them negatively.
It is a really complex, I guess, reason for that hate. And obviously, a lot of times, it can be found in simple things such as jealousy or,
Yeah.
combating for, space but it also does have to deal a little bit with, that those original stories, those fables, where the wolf was put in as a substitute for evil. People talk about, probably one of the most famous ones, the Little Red Riding Hood story. And most people don't realize that the wolf was not a wolf. The wolf was representing a man, an evil man.
Right.
So it was a story meant to scare kids, and so they decided to make the wolf into the monster. So that's kind of how that originated, and because that story became super popular, that becomes the first story sometimes that people will read about a wolf. And when that's
Right.
your first introduction to a wolf, is that, if the wolf is the monster, um, that solidifies in a child's mind. Fear is
Right.
powerful, especially with kids. So that memory, that feeling becomes, you know, it's just a concept that sticks. And so then now you're at an uphill battle from the start. So that's
Right.
part of the reason why I wanted these books. Not They very well could have been for older kids. I could have put more narrative in there. I could have put a little bit more science in there. They it That would have worked out perfectly as well. But I wanted it to be for young kids. I wanted it to
Yeah.
be those first memories of a more realistic version of the wolf. I didn't want it to be, the people snuggling with the wolves, the people, I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be where a child could read this and be like, wow, the wolf is great. And I respect the wolf. And the wolf is just like me, except the wolf is not in my house.
Right. Yeah, there's something really beautiful and powerful about that, right? Like, and I think you make a good point as well with like making it not like cuddled with the wolf, right? Because
Right.
I think that there's also sometimes we go over the line and we're like, oh, they're so great. Like, I don't know. I feel like some people are like, oh, they're, these angels or like whatever, which I mean, I love wolves, but I think just accepting wolves is like what they are and giving that respect, and accepting them as wild beings, right? Like, sometimes people don't recognize wild animals as wild animals and, get close to them, like in places like Yellowstone. Like that's just popping into my head how they don't respect their personal space or things like that. And I think you have a good point here of just like respecting animals as wild beings, but also appreciating them for their importance and their role ecologically and environmentally in the ecosystem.
Right. And that being said, this is something that should be applied to all wild animals. We do
Right.
see on our social media feeds scrolling, people like to feed squirrels and chipmunks. Not a good idea for anybody, so if one of those animals does bite you because they misunderstood your big hand there while you're trying to hand feed them,
Right.
then all of a sudden you're gonna I would advise getting rabies shots.
Right.
That's not really a good idea. You have them now thinking that they can come up to any human, and not every human will want to feed them. All of a sudden now someone's calling pest control. So the best idea is to respect boundaries, and with wildlife the boundary is always no touch.
And we have such great phones nowadays. Like you can zoom in so far, like if you wanted to get like a great picture. And it's I love supporting photography, as a great way to take a memory of something from the wild without actually having to take anything from the wild, and going and being able to observe those animals. And just being in their space. It's like the perfect little souvenir. Like you can have a picture on your phone and they zoom in
Right.
really great. So I'm sure you're going to get great pictures.
And it's an amazing moment. I talk with people. I have not yet been to Yellowstone. Would love to go, but
Yeah.
I haven't gone yet. And you talk with people that have gone and have been able to get the pictures, or at least see through the lens, get a glimpse of wolves, and just it's a powerful moment. You know, Take that as the value of it. You don't have to be up close to them. You still have that powerful and amazing moment to capture for the rest of your life, but you can do it at the distance that's appropriate.
Yes, yes, exactly. And it's funny talking about Yellowstone. I had two of my friends that actually spend one of them's a guide in Yellowstone and the other one just does a lot of wildlife photography there. And you know, she was talking about how it was so powerful that a wolf just looked at her when crossing the street. She just found a wolf in Yellowstone and there were no other cars. It was just her. And they had like this little moment of like looking at each other. And she was like, even that look was just so powerful. And if you want to get closer up to some of these wild animals, places like the Wolf Conservation
Yeah.
Center are really wonderful to be able to get, like obviously not touching, but like a little bit closer to be able to see them. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, it's a wonderful opportunity to so they do have ambassador wolves at the Wolf Conservation Center just for that purpose, so that
Right.
people can get that close experience. Now, the ambassador wolves, they are raised in a specific way. They are hand raised by a team of humans. So they call them the pup nanny team. And actually, we were just talking about this with other colleagues at the Wolf Conservation Center. It does take a special person to be able to raise a wolf like that, because they are different than dogs. And the purpose is so that that particular wolf won't be scared of humans. And they always say this at the Wolf Conservation Center: the most dangerous wolves there are those ambassador wolves because they're not scared of humans. The other wolves will run away. They run away all the time. They run away quickly. They run away. But the ambassador wolves, because they're not scared, they will stay. They will be up at the fence. And but it's a great opportunity for them to teach people about wolves, to teach so that they can see them up close, so that they can see, you know, their body structure, so that they can see their facial features, so so that they can learn, because that's one of the ways we learn. Another great way to do it is a lot of these facilities, including the Wolf Conservation Center, do have web cameras. And so the animals don't know that they're on camera, and they don't see a human around. So they will come closer to that area where the camera is pointing. Obviously, the camera zoomed in or can zoom in, but so it's not the camera right up in the face, but they can actually start to see body structure, and then they can really actually see that natural behavior. So in the fourth book, Trumpet Becomes a Mom, this is the one that just launched, Trumpet had those puppies on live camera. They had a camera in the den that she chose, the structured den that we provide. And so she gave birth to them. She nursed them. She cared for them. So we got to see all of that for, I believe it was the first week. Then, you know, as you saw in the first book, they do get that first health check. And once, you know, the mom's going to leave the den and hope that the den is well chosen, well secure, that people won't find the wolf. But obviously we know where those puppies are in the enclosure,
Right.
and so they will get that health check. And once she realizes that the people have found the den, she will move the puppies. So she then moved the puppies to a safer location, and that way she feels secure that the humans won't take the puppies or, you know, hurt the puppies.
And to build that natural instinct, right? Like to make people, right? Like to be more afraid of people. And then hopefully, if one of those puppies is lucky enough to be able, like you said, to be, I don't know if Trumpet, if her pups are up to possibly being a surrogate in the wild. Is that the case?
Yeah. So, you know, little teaser, I'm working on the fifth book.
Cool.
Trumpet, yeah, Trumpet was one of the wolves that one of her puppies got the immensely lucky opportunity to be cross-fostered into the wild. She was flown out. Actually, it was through Light Hawk Conservation Flying. They are a group of pilots that donate their services to saving endangered species. And they are featured in the third book. Like I said, Light Hawk is Trumpet's mate, and he was nicknamed Light Hawk as a thank you to that conservation flying group. So that was a great opportunity to kind of highlight conservation in these books and not have it and it being immensely cool. I mean, just to think about that, pilots, you know, helping save species, but also to not be overwhelming as far as talking about conservation with very young kids, with 3-year-olds, with 4-year-olds.
Right.
So Light Hawk Conservation Flying flew one of her puppies out into the wild, and that puppy was cross-fostered. And that was the first puppy to have a solo cross-foster or foster adoption. She was flown out alone. Usually they will fly multiple puppies together from the same litter or from 2 different litters, and so that it's not just one. But at that year, I believe they had, I think it was 12 spots available to cross-foster puppies from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife decision of which how many puppies were to be cross-fostered, and they had one more spot. And so one of her puppies got that spot. So
Wow.
That's another way I like to highlight conservation in these books, so that it's different, so that it's something that can be introduced, so that it can be a talking point. These books can be read by older kids to younger kids. And that's a great
Yeah.
opportunity to kind of, say, that's an interesting idea. Let's do a little bit more research. Let's find out a little bit more information. You can find all that information out from the Wolf Conservation Center on their site, and, further that discussion at different levels with the young kids,
Yeah.
with the older kids, with adults. I mean, if you really want to go into the background of all this genetic talk, they have it all on their website. So you can really go into the science behind it and learn a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's something it's a great starting point, like you said, with it being a children's book, because like you said, like if older kids want to learn more, then it kind of like breeds more interest, like, oh, I want to know like the more of the facts or in depth about what's going on with the Mexican gray wolves, or like the conservation center, or any one of those things. And I love the what is it called again? Lighthawk?
Yeah,
The
Lighthawk Conservation Flying. They are, I believe, over 1,000 pilots, participate in this
Wow.
program, and it's actually really interesting. They So depending on what animal or what animals they have to fly, they will have to choose which type of airplane can fly out. So the size, obviously funding the airports in the area. And some of these situations are, restricted airspace. So they have to have a certain, I guess, amount of flight hours or training that they have to have, because then on over restricted airspace you can't fly below a certain altitude, or so it is really interesting how they have to behind the scenes really organize this just to get
Right.
this animal to the right either facility or out into the wild. Sometimes an animal in a specific zoo or somewhere will have an injury and need maybe medical care that that facility can't give that animal, and that animal being endangered will need to be flown to a different area.
Sure.
It could be as simple as that. It could be a cross foster. It's a whole lot that they do.
It
They're
could get
amazing.
complicated, but I love that
Yeah.
as well, because there's so many different opportunities to get involved in helping wildlife, whether like it's just really incredibly cool to me that like you could be a pilot and you can help with wildlife or conservation, and in that way you can volunteer at a place. Like if you're great at marketing, you can help spread more information about stuff. Like there's so many different ways to use your unique skills and talents. Like if you also have this passion for nature and wildlife as well, like there is no one limit to being that. Like you don't necessarily have to be a scientist. I think sometimes when we're younger we think like, oh, if we want to work in wildlife or near animals, like we have to study biology. I was not great at math or anything like that, so that was really hard for me. But you can make your own way, and you can put multiple passions together and multiple skills together in order to help nature and wildlife. Hi, wild ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. This episode is sponsored by my clothing brand, FemmeSauvage, and you can find a discount code and link in the description. So check it out. We have a lot of amazing designs, and $5 of the proceeds goes to different charities. So please feel free to check it out and enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks so much. Hello, wild ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I have some exciting news. This April 2026, me and Dr. Carla Ionescu are taking
a couple of lucky people to Greece this year. It is going to be about the goddess Artemis. So all about the goddess of the wilderness, the forest. We're going to be doing amazing things like exploring her ancient sites where she's worshipped, like Broron and Eleusis, Patras, and a couple of other places, as well as doing archery and claymaking. So I hope that you're enjoying this episode. Check out the link in the description for more information, and we would love to see you there. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's just an amazing thing, to think about. There are so many different ways to help. If you want to offer it, sometimes
Yeah.
it could be, grant writing. Not every biologist is good at grant writing. So if you can work
Right.
together as a team, and you get a grant, what an amazing concept, to be able to lend your skill set to assist, what the needs of saving endangered species.
Yeah. And like, look at you, you're a volunteer, you're an author, like there's just so many different really unique and cool paths if you want to do something to help, because these animals are just so magical, and there's so much work being done to make sure they're still with us. So it would be amazing to keep the momentum going, and hopefully we can get to a point, because there's been a lot of success stories with other species about how they've been at the brink and then have come back. So I hope that we can get stronger numbers for both the Mexican gray wolf and the red wolf. I know that there's a lot of people trying.
Yeah. A lot of people
Yeah.
trying, but a lot of challenges. So we need
A
all the
lot.
help we can get.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you, so Trumpet the Miracle Wolf Pup is the first book. Do you maybe want to just like go in and name all the different ones that you have in your series so people know?
Yeah, so and originally this was all supposed to be one book, but again, all this content, it would just been too much for a 3 or 4 year old to handle.
Sure. Yeah.
There are some very young kids that can handle chapter books, but for the most part, the 3 year old really wants a picture book that's, not too overwhelming, not too detailed. So Trumpet the Miracle Wolf Pup ended up becoming the first. I really wanted to highlight pup development, because it's so interesting how quickly they develop. Well, that first year, they go from this potato-sized little puppy that has their eyes closed, they can't hear anything, their ears are down, and then by the first year they're this almost full-sized wolf, that's able to assist their family with hunting, not holding the pack
Amazing.
back, and just to have that rapid growth rate, all the different stages of development. I wanted to highlight that in a way that was fun for kids to understand, relate to. So when Trumpet first opens her eyes, and is able to see, and she's able to hear, that she will hear sounds that will be very similar to what young kids hear, birds tweeting, flying, and also that her first vision is of these like humongous trees, because her vantage point is so much lower, just like kids. So I really wanted
Yeah.
to highlight that beginning process. I wanted to highlight, how her scent glands, her olfactory senses, um, that they develop. But what's a fun way to do that, especially in a picture book that's not scratch and sniff, if those exist anymore. But
Right.
yeah, so I highlighted it that she discovered her mom's poop, and so I thought that was kind of a fun way to be like, have her kind of give a little funny face with
Kids love all that
smelling
stuff.
that. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I definitely wanted to highlight, and that is the second book, Trumpet Grows Up. And obviously, before she starts a family, she has to meet her mate. So in the third book, which we talked a little bit about, where we highlight Lighthawk conservation flying, she is introduced to her mate, Lighthawk. He was not born there, and he was flown in, but she also had to leave her family. So I did want to highlight that portion of it, that's a scary moment, especially with kids, when they start school, when they go somewhere new, maybe if the family moved, that it is a scary moment. But I did also wanted to highlight that that she overcame those fears, that she, really tried to make the best of the situation, learn the new area that she was in, and then meeting this brand new wolf who she doesn't know, and at first she's a little bit cautious. Just like kids, in school, when they first meet new friends that they're essentially strangers, that they might be a little cautious at first, so that they can also understand some of the feelings that she was going through. So I really liked highlighting that in Trumpet Finds Love. And then the fourth book that just launched, Trumpet Becomes a Mom. That's, we spoke about, that's when she became a family. Or started her family. And I really liked writing this book, not only because we got to watch her doing it on those web cameras, but also it highlights family in general. And, just like families come in all different shapes and sizes. Some of the families, some of the wolf packs that are essentially families, at the Wolf Conservation Center, they are siblings. So they are not the typical structure of mom and dad and the puppies of various litters, but they still consider themselves a family. And treat each other that way. They support each other. They also have their family squabbles. But they are family, and I really liked highlighting that in the fourth book. And also, like we spoke about before, there are adoption cases, and that was given a mention and kind of foreshadowing of the fifth book, that that wolves will sometimes have adopted family members in their family, and that is fully embraced by them, and fully embraced by people. So I liked to have that, that feeling that if a child that is adopted gets to read this, they're included in the family concept as well, and they can kind of relate to wolves as well. So I like that.
I love that. Yeah, I love all those beautiful little details from you, like about like how you put everything together, especially like my son just started a new school like fairly recently. So there's something really nice about having like the relatability of that with like younger kids, and like, oh, I can see myself in these wolves. It's just a very powerful, stories are very powerful, and being able to relate that, I'm sure it wasn't easy, like you said, trying to come up with like the perfect amount of things to put at, the grade level for 3-year-olds, that they could absorb it, but picking the things that that they would relate to, I think is very good on your part, because I think it comes off very well. My son really, like I said, enjoyed it so much, the first book that we have. So and he's about 3 going on 4, so
Oh, perfect age. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things I like to note, and this came as a little bit of a surprise to me, we always have our original thoughts, or I wouldn't say biases, but uh, for young boys, the third book, Trumpet Finds Love, that's their favorite. And
Oh,
I've heard this pretty consistently from the young boys, from the parents, and so it's just interesting. One of the little boys kind of, asked me to like come closer and whisper to me, that one's my favorite because she finds
Oh,
love. And so I just find that, sometimes we think that boys only want the, rough and tumble books, because I really thought that their favorite would be Trumpet Grows Up. But it actually was the little love story. And perhaps it is because, that the courting behavior that I highlighted in there is kind of fun, like Lighthawk being a little silly. Originally, I had kind of wanted, and many people who have multiple dogs or go to dog parks and the dogs play, they will see this kind of behavior where a dog will like, one will bow and then hop away, and that sort of courting behavior. And that's
right.
typically the courting behavior, some of the playful courting behavior that we see with wolves. But I was like, that's so hard to illustrate because
Yeah.
because you don't see the hop back, you don't see the playfulness. So what I took was actually a scent roll. One of the things that wolves will do to communicate with each other is they will roll in something to get that scent on them and then go back to their pack and say, hey, look what I found. And they will smell and they'll be like, oh, that's interesting. Let's go check it out.
Right.
And part of this is just to say, hey, guess what I found over down yonder? I found deer poop. There's deer there. So let's go. And how do you
Right.
tell your pack mates the best way is to get that scent on you and go. And then they all know exactly what you're talking about. And then as a family, they can go to that area.
Yeah, it's amazing the wolf language, right? Like there's so many pieces to how they communicate with each other, whether that be through body language, like you said, the scent rolling, which is like another thing that like I knew about, but I don't know, you explained it very well. And then also obviously like the howling and communicating that way. So they're very communicative animals.
Yeah.
They're constantly talking with each other, and it just goes to show how intelligent they are and social they are, that they need all of these different forms of communication to be able to relate back to each other.
Right. And each book has howling moments in there, whether they're at the beginning of the book or at the end of the book or in the middle. And I highly recommend howling with your kids together. It is a fun time, getting a group howl going. It's not just the wolves that like love to, howl together. People do too. It's something that really can connect. It's harmonious. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my son, anytime he sees like he has this animal book that's like his favorite, and he's come up to the wolf a couple of times, and he just starts howling, which is hilarious. It
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
it like lights me up. I'm like, oh my god, this is so cute. But it is fun, And then I start doing it with
Yeah.
him. It's
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, it's always fun. It's a good time.
Yeah, a lot of really beautiful moments in the books, and again, I can't wait to read the rest of them to my son because he really enjoyed the first one. But I also wanted to ask you about the Mexican gray wolf, specifically because that's what Trumpet is a Mexican gray wolf, and what like the difference is between a Mexican gray wolf and then just like a regular gray wolf that we were talking about in Yellowstone.
Yeah, one of the major differences actually is the size difference. So Mexican gray wolves are a little bit smaller, and the larger wolves, typically will be up north. So the Arctic wolf will be bigger, and so as you kind of go, I guess, closer to the equator, um, you know, typically even just animals in general become a little bit smaller. But
Right.
yeah, so the major difference is the size difference. So a little bit of difference in coloring, but I would say that's the major difference, and they are subspecies. So
Right.
let's say if which could definitely happen. Let's say Canadian Rocky Mountain gray wolf and a Mexican gray wolf were to breed, those puppies would not be considered full Mexican gray wolves and would not be participating in the program at this point. It is something that is kind of being talked about, especially with biologists and scientists, that would possibly be a beneficial future, is to start having that breeding between different subspecies of wolves, because right now the wild population, they're considered full siblings genetically.
Oh,
At some point we're coming from a population, a number of 7 wolves, and they're all related. So at some point, they become too closely related, and that's one of the major challenges. So one thing that they've discovered with red wolves, when they captured that population, brought them into captivity, and they found those, it was for the red wolves, it was 14 founding members. They did not capture all the red wolves, and somewhat fairly recently discovered were these canids in Galveston, Texas.
Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, and they call them the ghost wolves because originally people were saying, well, these are coyotes, but they really had some wolf-like features. And when some biologists started saying, let's kind of look into this, and started getting DNA samples from those canids, they found red wolf DNA in them. So
Wow.
some had not only survived, but then started breeding with coyotes, and that DNA survived. And if they can kind of further the science, then perhaps that can assist the program. And that idea is kind of being thrown out there as far as for the Mexican wolves as well, especially since we've had some of these Mexican wolves that have decided to disperse beyond their protected area. They're
Right.
looking to go out into their original areas that they lived in, and that would that be the worst thing?
Right.
I don't think it would be the worst thing for perhaps that to happen, and that could perhaps protect these wolves from going fully extinct again in the wild, or in the world. When you have that close relation to, especially one wolf, one female that connects all the wolves together genetically, it's what she's susceptible to. It could wipe out the population, a disease, or something that, and so you really want that diversity, and that would be a way to do it. So food for
Yeah,
thought.
that's a very interesting point, because I had Diane Boyd on a little while ago, and I remember us talking about how in there's studies shown that in Yellowstone, when I forget like the type of disease that it is, so forgive me, but that certain wolves will actually look for and mate with black colored wolves, because they have, oh, I think it's like canine distemper, like they have a certain resistibility to canine distemper, and like the wolves will pick up on that. So it's interesting that maybe the wolves, like the Mexican gray wolves, subconsciously know that, like I'm sure they know that maybe their genetic lines are too close together, and so that's maybe why they're reaching for further lands, to try to reach a partner that would bring a genetic diversity. Like maybe they just feel it inside that they know that they need that for their species.
The spread, yeah. Yeah, and we don't know for certain why certain wolves are choosing to kind of say, yeah, I need to get out of this area. But that could be one of the reasons that they're choosing. Could be just that they're saying, hey, it's getting a little crowded over here.
Yeah. Multiple
But
things, right?
for
Yeah.
whatever reason, that particular wolf knows that that's the best choice for them, and so that they want to do that.
Yeah, and I know that I'm actually going to North Carolina in a couple weeks to go hopefully see the wild red wolves. My friend Aspen is a wildlife photographer and guide at Alligator River. I was lucky to see them way off in the distance the last time, but it still counts. So I'm hoping to get
Yeah,
some yeah, I'm hoping to get some maybe a little bit closer view of them. I know that she was talking to me about how they have to be very careful with the red wolves there, not choosing a coyote as a mate, kind of like what happened at Galveston, Texas, like you were
yeah,
saying, and that they even collar and like neuter and spay the coyotes in that area, so that way there's coyotes filling up that space, but that they're not able to breed with the red wolves to
yep,
try to keep the genetic pool, going.
exactly. Yeah, no, that's definitely one big project that they were doing, especially since they, if they, and obviously there's the morality issue of, euthanizing those particular coyotes, you know, more coyotes would come in. So they kind of
Right.
wanted those coyotes to stay, but to be not able to breed. And so yeah, that was a big part of the Red Wolf program, is kind of maintaining that. That does take manpower, and hats off to them for like keeping with it, especially with the
Yeah.
challenges that program has been going through with
Yeah.
staffing, and so
Yeah, there's a lot, but I wanted to ask, I guess, like, as we're wrapping up here, like, what would you say is maybe like one of the best ways for people that like want to support or maybe like help out in this mission, like with either Mexican wolves or Mexican gray wolves or red wolves? What advice would you have for them?
yeah. So one of the big ways, the best ways, I would say, is just to get involved in what you feel comfortable with, whether that's calling your representative, whether that's just asking, your teachers to kind of bring that concept up in their classrooms of your kids. Whether that's going to a facility that has these wolves. A lot of zoos have either red wolves or Mexican gray wolves. Some have both, and or wolves in general, and just kind of when you're there with your kids, kind of talk about the importance of conservation, and teaching our next generation the importance of these wolves. If you have the time to volunteer on site and they have a volunteer option, that's another great way to spend your time and help these wolves. If you have the means, financial support, like Hawk Conservation Flying, they donate their flights. They donate it. They're able to do that because of donors that
Yeah.
that will donate financially and be able to support that program. Otherwise, that's not every pilot has that money,
Yeah.
so the donations are gladly welcome. The Wolf Conservation Center gladly takes donations. They do so much work beyond just on their site. So it's important to have those financial means to be able to do that. And just in general, just kind of having an open mindset to having wolves in our wild population, just to be understanding that life does work better in a balance. And, in that balance, we do need those keystone species, the animals that will help the entire ecosystems. And wolves are one of those keystone species. So to keep that in your mind, that it is important for them to be there for all wildlife to flourish. And so those are great ways to help support. And for the young kids, ask your library to get these books. And then perhaps, I'm not sure when this podcast is airing, but it is Wolf Awareness Week. It's the perfect
Yes.
opportunity to go into your library and ask them to add one of these books to their story time. A lot of libraries will do story time on a weekly basis. That's a great way just to help, talk about conservation for all age groups. They have, a number
Yeah.
of books that they could add to that collection of story time. So those are all different types of ways that people can get involved and promote conservation, and especially wolf conservation, which is so needed right now.
Yeah, especially right now. There's so many different things that I feel like we could probably have a whole podcast just on what's going on in the world, in the wolf world. But and what I wanted to also mention that's really beautiful that you do is like you donate some of the proceeds of your book towards wolf conservation, right?
Yeah. So 50% of the profits from from these books does go back to the Wolf Conservation Center, because I wanted Trumpet's story to help her species. And so, just reading Trumpet's story helps her species, but also financially to kind of give back. I do also donate to Lighthawk Conservation Flying, especially when I found out, all the work that they do. So part of the profits from the books, they go towards that, towards them as well. And
Beautiful.
so I'm just, I'm wowed by them. I was wowed when I first learned of them, and then when I learned more about what they do, I was just amazed.
It's really fascinating. I'm definitely gonna look them up after the podcast because now I'm very interested. I just think that's really cool. And again, just the fact that like, you can use any of your talents to help wildlife. I just think it's amazing, and I think it's amazing your book series and bringing awareness to Mexican gray wolves. And I love Trumpet's story, and I'm glad she has like a beautiful, happy ending. And I can't wait to read the rest. So let people know, I guess, like where they can connect with you if they want to do that, and where they can get these amazing books.
Yeah. So if people want to contact me, they can email me at leokadiageorge.books@gmail.com. That is my email and also they can find more information about me and the books through Briley and Baxter Publications. They are my publisher, and they have bio on me, and also, all the talks I've done. And as far as getting the books, you can get them directly from the Wolf Conservation Center, NewYorkWolf.org. They have an online store. If you go to one of their programs, you can buy the books there at the program. You can also buy the books online, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, all even smaller online retailers will be able to get the books for you. So whatever way you're comfortable with, if you have a Prime or whatever you have, you can get them that way. But a lot more indie bookstores are actually picking them up. And I've noticed a lot more indie bookstores are also offering online sales. So, you can contact your local indie bookstore and see if they have them there, get them from them. So there's a variety of ways that you can get these books, and I would graciously thank you if you do, and remember to help.
Here's the first one. I know you have it behind you, but I have this one, and I love the artwork too. Is your illustrator did a beautiful job with the art.
Yeah.
You know, I'm an artist too, so I always appreciate art, and it just came out fabulous. So yeah.
It did, yeah.
I
I
just
can't
wanted
take
to
credit
thank you.
for it, but Maddie Moore is
Well,
amazing.
she brought your concept to life for the words, so but she did a
Yeah.
wonderful job. And thank you so much, Monica, for coming on and for sharing this, your beautiful inspiration behind the book, and just giving us some more information about, you know, Mexican gray wolves and the Wolf Conservation Center. I love everything that both you and the Conservation Center are doing, and just amazing work. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
And thank you for offering this platform. It is amazing to be able to talk about things like this. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Wild Ones, for listening. I'm going to link everything in the description below. So if you'd like to go ahead and purchase some of Monica's books, that would be amazing. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
Revel in the moment like a river flowing to the sea. I feel the energy of life force flowing all through me, and I'll allow it all to dance with my body and play. And no one could ever convince me to give my power away. 'Cause the motion